Okay, I'll call this meeting of the Covington Planning Commission to order. According to the agenda, the first item is a roll call.
Chairman Robertson,
Here?
Vice Chairman Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Lamb,
Here.
Mr. Morgan, Mr. Shawver,
Here.
Mr. Wickline,
Here.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum. Second agenda item, reading and approval of Planning Commission minutes for the meeting held on February the 16th, 2021.
Move for approval.
I have a question. I see this address for these Silveries. Where in the world is that correct?
hold on, I don't even, Miss Scott typed the,
Third
public hearing stuff.
paragraph from the bottom.
Yeah, they do.
Yes, yeah.
They own the house locally, but they live in Washington.
Okay, all right.
They joined us in the meeting.
Yeah, I remember that, but it didn't, when I saw that, I thought, somebody's got something crossed up here.
No, it's actually right.
Okay, good, thank you. Let me see, I had something highlighted over here, all right. Okay, we have a motion to approve, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against nay? The ayes have it. Number 3, unfinished business. We'll move now to the Central Business District. Eric?
Okay. If you don't mind, I would like to discuss the actual zoning ordinance again before we move into the Central Business District. It was kind of hanging out there with recommendations to be made. If that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
So, at the last time when we got done reviewing that, I had stated that I would give some recommendations related to parking and multi-unit development in R3 districts. And I've kind of given that some thought and thought hard about it. And I believe that the way to restrict that fairly is to allow for up to 3 units per parcel to be converted into multi-unit in existing structures, but require off-street parking for the additional units created. So in other words, if the house is there and we would allow for on-street parking for the 1 unit currently as a single-family residence, if you're going to convert that into a multi-unit apartment building, or, you know, for lack of a better term, a duplex or something like that, then we would actually require off-street parking for those additional units as part of the conditions for doing that.
How would they do that?
Excuse me?
How would they do that?
So you can add off-street parking in the rear yard in R3 districts. You can even get it in the front yard if you're willing to pay for additional curb cuts and things like that. But I don't see any other way to address the parking issues without it being required on-site off-street. That's the only way I can see it. And I think if you get more, in an R3 district, the lot size is so small that if you go to more than 3 units and you have off-street parking for 2 of those units on the site, then they're going to have to park those cars take up yard space. And those are already small yards. Their areas are smaller than the R2 or R1 districts. So I feel like you have to limit the amount of units per parcel of land too, to keep from just having a whole yard full of cars.
Eric, I like that, but one of my concern hearing you recommend additional parking is some of our side streets where maybe there's not any front yard and they've got some side yard and they've got some backyard. Some of our side streets, they're not that are not one way, but basically when you try to come up them, you're only going one way. So my concern would be that that would infringe on that access as well, and make it even, some of our streets make it even more difficult to go up and down.
And so what I'm trying to encourage is less on-street parking and more parking in the yard with the way I'm proposing it.
And that works for me.
Okay, and that's what I was trying to avoid, because we have the exact situation that you're describing, and we're already maxed out or over capacity on parking in some areas. So I want to make sure that any additional housing created is going to require that off-street parking element.
Then it would have to be out of the right of way.
Yes, sir. It'd have to be on the private property, should not be in the public right-of-way. You're allowed to cross the public right-of-way if you get a curb cut and cross the sidewalk, and all that work has to be coordinated with Public Works to be sure that you're not damaging any infrastructure and that the curb cuts are created and constructed to their standards.
Two things. First of all, go back to what you were saying about maximum 3.5.
3 units
Maximum 3 units per
parcel.
parcel.
Yep, so if you have a primary use structure on a piece of land, I'm not talking about accessory structures, just the primary use structure. We wouldn't allow you to subdivide it into more than 3 dwelling units per that primary structure.
Do you think that's appropriate for all structures?
No, but there's things in building code
Yeah,
that take care.
that's where I'm going. Do we have ways to preclude
Yes.
in the
So,
wrong situation?
yeah, a building code has certain specifications for requirements for dwelling units, certain room sizes, and certain utility type things. So as an example, a sleeping area has to be a minimum of 70 square feet. So a bedroom has to have a minimum of 70 square feet. So there are things that say, within this structure, if you're going to have X amount of dwelling units, there's certain requirements for certain spaces to be a minimum size as you're creating it. So those would apply, and that's going to dictate how many they can, so we're not going to wind up with somebody living in a closet is the thing. It's actually going to be a livable space. It may be small, but it's going to be a livable space. You're required to have at least 1 kitchen sink, a full restroom, so toilet, lavatory, a shower stall or bathtub, and then 1 sleeping area of 70 square feet, but that can be combined with a living area, so like an efficiency apartment. But those are kind of the minimum requirements in building code. So what I'm saying is in the zoning ordinance, let's say, to help decrease that density per lot, that we hold it on those rehab structures or those reuse structures to 3 units per, and then require off-street parking. You have to be able to provide off-street parking to be able to do that.
Is that what those other municipalities did?
Not all.
We pulled Blacksburg and so what was some other one down there? Pulaski or somewhere in.
So I'm not sure. This is just kind of under my consideration. I didn't really take a look at other ones because I think that our parking situation is a lot more unique to us. Because we have less planned development in a lot of our areas. It was kind of spurred up by the industrial growth and the boom that we had back in the day. And so it wasn't planned like a lot of areas in Blacksburg were. They were planned with a lot of off-street
Well, they have
parking.
to, I guess with the influence of the student population, I mean, they're renting closets and anything they can rent down there, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
I was just curious, because I know we did call on some of those other municipalities, and we got their zoning to refer to.
Yes, yes. And I have referred to a lot of those in the past. This one was just me giving consideration to our specific uses and how I would think it would be a good way for us to overcome it. But, there's always more than one way to fix a problem. So, that's why I want to hear discussion and comment related to those recommendations so we can kind of hash this out a little bit.
The second thing, I was curious, were you gonna say something?
On this, I'm assuming you're talking about a house, you're dividing it up into like 3 apartments.
Yes, sir.
All right, would this also apply to like a boarding house or bed and breakfast?
So it could, yeah. And so when you have the situation with short-term rentals, and in our code, we refer to boarding houses and things like that in the past. We don't really refer to short-term rentals because those have already been covered in the past in our ordinance. We were pretty progressive for the time when that was written, honestly. So yeah, it could apply to that. You could segment your house up into separate dwelling units this way and then do short-term rentals such as those you described. And they would apply, but it's when you modify this house into those separate elements, we're gonna kick in the requirement for that off-street parking to accommodate it. And, right now, the way that a lot of the short-term rental works, we really don't have a way to track them or know that they're doing it other than seeing them on the sites that are utilized for that. But this one says if you're modifying the house to make separate dwelling units, when we issue the building permit, we're going to confirm that you're providing off-street parking for those additional units.
And when you say off-street parking, can it be as simple as pulling up in the yard, or does it have to be parking?
So our code describes what type of surfaces are required for off-street parking. It says gravel, asphalt, or concrete. So you can create a gravel parking area, you can create an asphalt parking area, you can create a concrete parking area. But it has to be some sort of dedicated area. So what we're trying to prevent there is you dragging a bunch of soil out onto the road, and then that sediment entering the stormwater system and causing issues, not just for us, but sedimentation downstream and eventually at the Chesapeake Bay. But that's what the code says, and I believe that's part of the zoning appendix too, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I believe it's in there.
All right. Anything else?
No, not on that. That's the main thing that I had my notes, if I remember, that I was going to make recommendations on in that. And, if you would, I'd just kind of like a consensus that that's an agreeable option, and we'll see if we can't draft some language.
It works for me as long as it works for everybody else and it is controllable and enforceable.
Yeah, and I was trying to come up with something that was fair, but allowed for us to get a little bit of redevelopment of some of these structures, but hopefully doesn't have unintended consequences of creating other issues. The R3 district, if you read the intent of the language at the very beginning of it, it was allowed to take care of existing structures of that type that were already in existence when the ordinance was adopted. But I think with the way that some of the neighborhoods are going down, we need to find another adaptive reuse for some of these structures and encourage some of that. So a lot of people are not as interested in owning their own home anymore as they are having a place that they live in that's small, that's kind of taken care of, and hopefully that's what we encourage by doing this, and get some of these other houses back into use again, even if they're multi-unit.
Okay. Anything else in that proposed district?
I'm finished. If everybody else is good, we'll draft some language to try to include it that way.
Okay, works for me. All right, moving to the next item. Proposed ordinance revision of ordinance 20-14 Appendix B.
So that's the one, actually, we skipped over the first one. Now we're to the central business district.
Oh,
Remember,
I
I
was
asked
wondering,
you
I was
to-
trying to decipher
Yeah,
it.
sorry for the confusion. I was trying to take care of the one that we had finished on last
But
month.
it was two things there. We captured both of those? Yeah, okay. All right, let's back up to the central business district so I can get back on the same sheet you guys are on.
Sorry about that. I caused that confusion. So hopefully everyone had a chance to kind of review this. You may have had more of a chance than I have, but it's been a while, and I know with new members, I probably would first like to give them an opportunity to kind of question or voice their opinions about any part of it, and hopefully I can clarify from memory why or how, or maybe Mr. Chairman can, but get you
Why
all
don't
up to
you
speed.
give them the
reasoning behind it?
5-minute reasoning of where this came from?
Sure. So the city's comprehensive plan called for development of an overlay regulation district in our downtown area. And so after looking at it and giving it some careful thought, I thought that an overlay district may cause a lot of confusion on the part of the citizens who are trying to read it and understand, because you would have overlay district regulations on top of the underlying zoning regulations. And so I felt it best to try to come up with a whole new zoning district that applies to the historic district downtown. And we aren't locked in on those as boundaries yet, but that's what we've discussed in the past. And so just like I was talking about a R1 district or an R2 district or R3 district, this is its own district, a central business district, and we're intending it for the downtown area. And so it's meant to help allow and encourage uses that we want to have in our downtown area, yet restrict ones that may not be what we want to happen downtown. So currently, downtown has a mixture of zoning levels. Most of them are commercial. We do allow for commercial uses, or I should say residential uses on the upper floors. But there's underlying zonings downtown as high as C3, which require for some uses that are in the buildings. But they also allow for uses you may not want, like heavy truck repair and automotive repair. So it leaves me in a situation where if someone came and they wanted to do a heavy truck repair business on a C3 parcel in the middle of the 300 block of Main Street, it's a by right use. I can't deny it. I cannot deny it. But you'd have somebody working on semis in between two restaurants or two stores potentially. So we're trying to avoid those incompatible uses by creating a district specific to our downtown area. And so we've been working to develop this for quite some time, pre-COVID. And now we're getting to the point where it's kind of narrowing down toward the ends of the discussion, but with fresh eyes on it, I'd love to hear opinions, hear thoughts on it, try to answer your questions, because we'll be moving toward recommending council review this and consider adoption of it is the whole point. And like I said, it's spurred through our comprehensive plan calling for this type of action to occur.
Thanks. I know that, like he said, we've probably been looking at this thing for 18 months. And the one place that we already have done some paring down is the permitted uses. Obviously, that's easy. Trying to get everything covered and defined as much as we can. Like he said, if you don't, you'll end up with a problem down the road. Also, with the site development. We talked at length about ingress and egress to places and sidewalks and all kinds of stuff that made sense. So that is the way we arrived at this draft. I guess I have the most recent one. When I pulled it out the other night, I didn't have it dated. But anyway, that's how we got here. If you haven't had time to look at it and make considerations, especially on the uses, please do that. But it's I guess a good thing. Which brings me to a question that I have about, for lack of a better term, this downtown revitalization group. Are y'all familiar with that? I've seen it in the paper, and is it appropriate to talk about that now?
It's appropriate.
One of my questions is, why isn't one of us ad hoc on that committee?
So I actually addressed that question to some members who are on that committee, because I'm not involved in it either, and asked them to consider adding a member of Planning Commission to that. So I haven't heard anything back from that yet, but I did bring it up. It was actually at the Old Town Covington meeting, because Old Town's involved in that process. And I brought it up because I know there were several members there who are on that. And like I said, I'm not involved in it, so I can't speak to it in any detail about what it is. You probably have read as much in the paper as I know about it. But I did request that they add a member of Planning Commission to that committee so that they could be informed and report back to the Planning Commission for us to be aware of what they're planning on.
We just did a survey, I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, it was on the chamber website, I believe. I actually participated and did that survey.
And when I went on to put my 2 cents in, it had closed the day before. So anyway, but I think it would be appropriate for us to be represented on that, even as an ad hoc.
Yes, sir, I agree,
Capacity.
Mr. Chairman, and I tried to make that known.
Well, they're fixing to make some decisions about our city, and some of them aren't city folk. So.
So how do we make that happen, Eric?
So one of the,
Down, brother.
so, there was a member of city council that heard that request, and there was a couple other members that are in that committee. So I'm hopeful the next time they have a meeting that they'll address that, hopefully. I did voice that concern at the Old Town Covington meeting to some members I knew were there. It was a virtual meeting, so everybody in the group heard me voice the concern.
Good, okay. So back to this central business district, what are you looking at from us for this right now?
So right now, it's just more comment, especially from the new members. If they've got questions or comment or anything anyone else believes we need to look at or address, because we were really reaching what I felt like was pretty close to the finish line with it there when we got interrupted by COVID. So, I'd like to, any concerns anyone has, this is kind of the time. Any questions anyone has, this is kind of the time. And then we'll finish cleaning this up if there's not any major ones. Give you one last look at it before we move it to review probably by the city attorney prior to recommending to council. I'd like to have it kind of in a completed, legally approved form before it moves to council for consideration.
Well, we've got all these new folks here, and they're going through the learning curve and figuring out what things mean and what they can do and how they're empowered and things of that nature. So I would propose, if everybody's good with it, that you come back to us next meeting with a final draft
Okay,
for discussion.
sure.
And if everybody is cool with what they've got, let's give you time to look over it, or talk to Eric, or talk to me about it. If everybody's cool with what they got, then you've got your final draft. If not, then we'll edit it as we need to.
Okay, so just let me clarify. So we clean up, final draft, review, then I take it to the city attorney. If he makes any substantive changes, bring it back to you and for review
Well,
of
I'm gonna
that.
leave that up to your judgment. I
Okay.
mean, when you're talking about the legal aspect of it, if you bring it back to us, we can't change it.
Correct, and that's why I say if it's anything of substance that we've included that he says we can't legally do, then I would bring that back, if you're okay with me using my judgment for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
If it's just a little technical wording or something that's
Yeah.
kind of inconsequential, then I would probably say.
Well, I mean, that, Eric, in my mind, is what we're paying him to do.
Yeah.
Is Keep us out of trouble
Keep us
before
out
we
of
get in
trouble.
trouble.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
I had a question and I had a suggestion
Okay,
where I've been looking over it. My question is under permitted uses under civic,
okay, let me get where you're at, hold on.
On the first page.
first page.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, I was wondering where the jail and the courthouse and all that fit into any of these that you have listed.
So to me, that would fall underneath of administrative type services, really. We probably could look and make sure that that definition would encompass them, but that's where I believe.
That's a good
it
point,
fit.
Mike. I mean, maybe
I mean,
we
we
put
got-
governmental
we-
facilities or something like
Yeah,
that.
we got detention facilities right down there at the jail,
Yeah,
Yep,
so.
that's a good point.
it is a good point. And that's the great thing about having fresh eyes, We want to make sure we don't overlook things.
My suggestion was for the downtown district to proceed up Lexington Street to Fudge Street and then over to the tracks for a couple reasons. That used to be the main strip. You come down Main Street to Maple and you come up Maple, all the parades and everything ended up up behind the firehouse on Maple. Also, with the historic district going in the 200 block down there where they're doing the museum and all that, they've already got the historic district up at 100 block of South Maple. Also
Yes.
up there with the train depot and all. So you're sort of tying that in.
Yeah, and so that was one discussion we kind of touched on months and months ago now, was whether we want to extend beyond the historic district. And I still think that's a valid discussion to have before we move toward council for sure. And so I would encourage everyone to take what Mr. Wickline's discussing and consider that prior to us approving the final draft. Where do we recommend this applies to? I think all of us are pretty much in agreement that the minimum size is the historic district boundary.
Where is Fudge Street?
It's, Prospect is the one where the Union Hall is, and the
Okay.
very next street is Fudge. And I was looking there, you had Old Christian Motors there, you had the Old 500 Club, you got a couple other buildings sitting back there, but basically you got lots back there that could be used to build a business or something.
Yep, and you're thinking, I like the way you're thinking. You're thinking
I do
long
too.
term. And I like that too, because that area, in our comprehensive plan, actually, the area from Oak Street, I guess, all the way down to meet the historic district is kind of marked, if I'm not mistaken, transitional use. And so, it's gonna lean itself, we're predicting it's gonna lean itself toward more commercialization. So I think that's a very valid area to be in the discussion.
I stopped at Fudge because from there on down till you get to D.D. Kearns down there, you had homes and stuff in there.
Yeah, but the truth is, there's not as many as you probably think. If you actually ride through there and count the number of homes, especially the ones that are occupied, for the amount of area it is and the zoning level that it is and how dense it could be, there's really not that many in there. And I think that led to it being recommended as a transitional area in the comp plan, to try to get that land back into a more appropriate use, especially the land near the railroad, I think, was the real big thing. Because I think that's, the thought was that railroads are almost like heavy industry. If I was going to apply zoning to something like that, it would probably be an M2 use, as the way our code describes it. So having residential right against that heavy industry sometimes is incompatible uses, really. And I think that's why there's less and less housing in that area, because there's better areas to build in.
I know they built a Habitat house or two down there. didn't
Yep, they built a couple of them up there, sure did. Probably, what, in the 90s maybe?
they? Yeah.
And I think a couple of years ago, wasn't they trying to close off the street down there where Kearns had both sides, where
Yep.
it loops out? They was trying, I know that it got stopped, but I mean, that was concerned them at the time.
Yeah, I mean, and Kearns, requested that, and I think I've heard it mentioned at least twice since I've been with the city. So, I do like the discussion, and I think that's something we probably should put as a discussion topic for next month when we bring the draft back, because we do need to determine exactly where we recommend this to apply to. Because it would wipe out the underlying zoning regulations. And if we're thinking about that, the housing that would be there, that exists there today, would probably be the only housing that would be allowed to continue to exist there, because it would have to transition to meet this district's regulations after that.
Do we have a map of the historic district?
We can provide one, yep.
I guess.
I printed it all, it's in there, but it was grayed out, so I went in and,
Oh, did you get straight down on all that?
yeah,
Okay.
I went in and printed one off so I
Okay.
could get it in
Well,
color. so I
everybody
could-
take a look at that and take a ride. Like I told you, when we have these cases, the easiest thing to do is take a ride. And you really get a feel for what's going on, because I can't place Oak Street, I can place a 500 Club and all that stuff, but
How does that impact the city's depot? Public
So
works.
the depot would be included in the current historic district? It's already inside of it.
yeah, I thought it was.
But not according to this map.
Well, that one's wrong then, because we've got the one from the Historic Resources Division upstairs. We actually have one that's overlaid on a satellite imagery too. It may be helpful to bring that
That
and use
in
as a
the next
visual.
package, if you would,
I can go print it right now if you want it.
No, we'll get it next month.
get it
and
to
that
us
way
in
it's good.
time that we're all talking from the same piece of paper,
Yeah,
Okay.
all right?
yeah, because that's
Because,
where it'll come to play.
like Eric said, what we're gonna do is we're gonna want to look at where we are with the historic district and then see how we want to enlarge it or follow the same meets and bounds of it.
Yeah, we wouldn't be affecting the historic district boundaries because that's registered with the Department of Historic Resources, but we would be, how we're gonna apply this new zoning district, we don't have to leave it with the historic district boundaries. That was just a suggested starting point that we kind of focus on, but, I'm not too sure. I think Mr. Wickline has a very valid point, especially in that area, just south by the street orientation of the Collins, all those buildings down through there, especially up to Fudge. That's a very valid topic, I think, especially between Nelson and the railroad in that area. Yeah, very valid.
Okay. So that, I guess, we're finished with the discussion of this thing. Thank you
Yep,
for
thank you.
that. Under new business, we got an email this afternoon that Mr. Scruggs was resigning. We appreciate what he did and his service, and I guess he's moving on to something else. I'll talk to him and figure out what's going on. Having said that, we're going to need to fill a hole. We don't fill it, the city council fills it, but if you know of folks that you feel like would be interested in this and could serve and be valuable to us, talk to a council member, talk to Eric or myself, and I'll pass it on. And always look for diversity. It's hard to get people to serve on these sometimes, so if you can come up with a couple names and a couple diverse opportunities for people, that'd be good. Correspondence?
Don't have anything.
Anybody got anything else?
Mr.
Lamb,
Chairman.
you got anything from the floor?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.